All right, we're back with lessons 5 through 7 from topic 8. So the first one is lesson 5, living in Africa. And I'm going to do one big video for all of them since the test is a little bit shorter. So where do Africans live? So geography and climate help determine a big part of where their population density is in Africa. Many of the most densely populated regions in Africa are found near water sources, which is kind of common sense, right? Or in climates with regular precipitation or rainfall. So in North Africa, the populations are highest along the Mediterranean coast and along the Nile River Valley because of easier ways or access to getting water. So throughout Africa's history, people have chosen where to live based on that access to water and having a better climate for farming, because some places are way too hot for any kind of farming. For example, almost all Egyptians live along the Nile River. The Sahara is like a big dividing part of Africa. So drier regions of Africa are much more sparsely populated. Sparse means fewer people. The world's biggest hot desert is the Sahara. It separates the people of North Africa from those residing in the rest of the continent. So it's a big part of Africa. We've seen it in the maps, right? So very few people live in the Sahara Desert. But many of the ones that actually do live there live and farm in oases, which is an OASES. An oasis is a place in the desert where water can actually be found. And so other people of Sahara are nomads. So some do live there and they just move from place to place. And how they survive is they trade things like sheep and camels and goats. So they're basically herders that trade their animals. Let's see. So there's also something called a savanna, which is more like a park-like grasslands, a little more south. So you have a little more people living in that area. And as time goes on and has gone on throughout Africa's history, people began shaping their environments. So what do we mean by that? Well, irrigation can bring water to dry land. So people were starting to figure out how to get water from the rivers and the coastlines to a little more inward. And as people began doing that, the grazing of livestock started to stress out the grasslands that are prone to drought. So if you've got, minimal crops growing or grasslands growing, and you have the cows and other things, living there and eating the grass, it's going to be rough on the crops and on the grasslands. So religious diversity. Religion is Africa's home to a great diversity of religions. Islam is the most dominant of religions in the north, and it's dominant in all of those northern countries except for Ethiopia. Ethiopia is mostly Christian. On the east coast and the northern parts of West Africa, they're also dominated by Islam. Egypt, though, is another one that is also a Christian, has a large Christian minority called the Copts, Copts, and they speak Arabic, but they belong to a very ancient Christian church, so it's another offshoot of that. And again, Ethiopia is mostly Christian. Ethnicities are also very diverse across Africa. Remember, I always say that I love learning about Africa because of the diversity of the whole culture, the people, everything. So every African country includes different ethnic minorities. In most African countries, there is no ethnic majority, though. There's so many small minorities, there's no majority. So it means that there's no single there's no single group that makes up more than half of the population. So during the colonization of Africa, European powers drew the continent's borders without considering ethnic differences. So as a result, like we saw with the Rwandan genocide and other issues that we talked about, most countries are home to multiple ethnic groups, some of which were split up between countries, and the ethnic tensions are very common. So ethnic groups are defined by that shared identity and shared cultural practices and traits, and it usually includes a shared language. Just as there are many ethnic groups in Africa, there are also very many languages. They estimate about 1,500 different languages. And most Africans speak more than one language, which is kind of interesting, right? All right, so lesson 6 is called Africa at Work. So what kind of government is there? So today, one of Africa's most stable democracies is South Africa. South Africa is a parliamentary democracy. And there's a lot of different groups across there that have different types of democracies, but not all of them work really well. Many of them are autocracies. So remember we talked about apartheid, that apartheid in the last test. So after the end of apartheid, free elections produced fairly stable governments in South Africa. So that's why it's the most stable democracy in Africa is South Africa. Kenya and Nigeria have presidential democracies, so it's going to be a little more similar to us, where the people directly elect their president. Okay, in recent decades, many countries have been trying to specialize in new activities, trying to get their economies better. And this includes the service sector. So Kenya has had a lot of success developing services such as call centers. These are businesses that have groups of workers who provide customer service by phone. Just like, when you call somebody, like let's say, AT&T to get help with your cell phone or something, they a lot of times will outsource those to other countries, and Kenya is one of those countries that does that. They have different types of money in different parts of Africa. So that causes issues with currency exchange costs. So to minimize those currency exchange costs, several West and Central African countries share a common currency called CFA franc. And this currency is linked to the euro, so that way they can use it at both places, and it helps them be easier trade partners. Africa's economy is very, very vast and different, though. It varies depending on where it's at. Kenya is known for its farming. Nigeria has substantial supplies of oil and other kind of exports related to that. So they've got a lot of energy production. So Nigeria is known for having pretty good energy production. South Africa is known for having mineral wealth. But a lot of these things are still tied to the environment and to the earth. Okay. Gross domestic product, GDP. You've had to look this up in all of your different CHIPS travels, right? So the gross domestic product is per capita is the value of goods and services produced in a country in any given year. Okay, so it's basically a measurement that shows whether people have a higher income than people in another country. It just kind of gauges how much money per country. And so the GDP per capita is one way to measure a country's standard of living. And overall, the GDP in different parts of Africa is very low, typically. All right, lesson 7 is challenges facing Africa. And I mentioned this in class for a few classes about the biggest issue is water, right? So Africa struggles with a lot of serious environmental issues, and access to clean water is very limited, and waterborne diseases are very, very common. So most Africans do not have access to proper toilets or waste disposal systems. Can you imagine living like that? How difficult that would be. So as a result, human waste often ends up in rivers, in groundwater, places that people rely on for drinking water. So then you get waterborne diseases as people are drinking it. One example is cholera, and that's CHOLERA. Cholera is an infection that causes acute dehydration and can kill someone within hours, and it spreads very quickly. So it's important for Africa to try to work on this. 115 Africans die every hour from water pollution. That's why you've got different celebrities and organizations trying to go in Africa to help them get clean water. Only about 1/6, 1 out of every 6 Africans have access to clean drinking water supply for drinking, also for cooking, for even hygiene, like showering, brushing your teeth. Because it's so scarce, water is often stored in people's homes. And then what happens is they'll store it in some kind of barrel, let's say, and then it becomes contaminated and attracts mosquitoes. Like we have that problem in the South. If you've got a pond in the backyard or a little puddle, it can grow mosquitoes. These mosquitoes, though, in Africa are very common carriers for diseases, including malaria. So the lack of clean water can also affect things like irrigation. So it makes it difficult to irrigate their crops safely. So that also impacts their food supply, and their efforts to even export crops to make money. So it's really a big problem for them. Deforestation and desertification is another problem. Desertification is just like the word sounds, a desert, right? So the change from arable land, meaning like land that you can actually grow things on, So it changes from arable land to desert land is a major problem in the Sahel. That's Sahel. So in this area, livestock herders have grown in number. They've become more and more herders of different kinds of animals. And so too many livestock now graze in this fragile grassland, like I said earlier, and people are chopping down trees for firewood. So this combination of things, including drought, have caused parts of the Sahel to dry out completely and become deserts. Where it was kind of grassy lands, able to grow some things, it's now become a whole lot drier. So it leaves less land for farming and grazing, and increases the risk of famine. You have less animals to grow and for food and such. Another big challenge is political challenges. So many African countries became more democratic in the 1990s, but there are very, very few of them have full democracies in Africa, where the government and where civil liberties are respected and there's checks and balances on political power. So you still don't have a lot of that all over. Mauritius is an island that's considered the most or the only really truly functioning democracy in Africa, and that's spelled Mauritius. So it's an island that really is doing a great job with democracy. Ethnic conflict is another huge issue among groups within countries across Africa. This adds to another challenge for a weak government. So if a weak government is in place, when you have these major groups that are fighting with each other, the government has a hard time helping it. An example is in Nigeria. There are relations between the Hausa, Hausa, the Hausa people of the north, and the largest ethnic groups of the south, which they're called the Yorubas, Yorubas, and the Igbos, Igbos. They're often very tense. And again, this country is not very strong government-wise, so they have a hard time keeping this in check. So what makes Africa have such a rough time having a good economy? Africa is the poorest of the world's major regions, so poor. And so many of these countries lack the equipment and roads even to produce valuable goods and then export them around to get them to markets and things. And many Africans don't receive a proper education or even decent health care, so that just affects their entire life. So as a result, they're not as productive at work as they could be. If you're not as healthy, if you don't have proper health care, you miss more work, right? Also, political conflict has hurt African economies across the board. Almost half of all Africans live in areas without paved roads, okay, just, dusty dirt roads. And so roads, and the roads that are actually in good condition are so crowded with traffic that people can't get where they need to go, and so that leads to loss of productivity. Also, healthcare is a big issue. So inadequate healthcare contributes to high rates of AIDS death. Africa has been hit hardest by AIDS, which is a deadly disease caused by the HIV virus. AIDS attacks the immune system and has killed up to 1.5 million people in Africa per year. So it's a huge crisis. And not having the proper medicines and healthcare system to help fight this has just made it worse. Many countries are even too poor to even treat these people properly, the sick people properly. And when so many people get sick and die, it also hurts the economy and others because things are not getting done. You have less workers. So the health system also holds back development and hurts everybody in general. There are different foreign groups called NGOs, which is non-governmental organizations. And these are like non-profit groups, so they're not trying to make money, they're just trying to survive to help people. They operate with private funding, and they try to help people with disease and poverty. So they rely on people that are maybe celebrities or other organizations across the world to kind of go in there and give money to them to help them try to fix these crises. All right, that's it for the tests.